Have you ever noticed how often people don't fail at things, but instead stop just after they become uncomfortable? Not when something is impossible, but when effort increases, feedback arrives, or progress stops feeling smooth. From a human perspective, quitting often feels like self-respect or realism. From a non-human perspective, it follows a consistent pattern tied to discomfort avoidance rather than accurate assessment. People quit not because the path is wrong, but because friction appeared sooner than expected. Most people believe quitting is a rational decision made after evaluating outcomes. Meta-intelligence notices that in practice it usually happens in response to emotional discomfort, not objective failure. The discomfort can take many forms: effort without reward, uncertainty about direction, or loss of early momentum. The nervous system is not designed to optimize long-term outcomes. It is designed to reduce discomfort quickly. When effort increases and rewards are delayed, the brain looks for escape. Quitting offers immediate relief even when it quietly closes valuable paths. This is why quitting often feels justified. The story sounds responsible. People say they are protecting their energy, choosing alignment, or avoiding wasted time. These explanations feel reasonable, especially when the alternative is continuing without reassurance. From observation, quitting rarely happens at the beginning. It happens after initial excitement fades and before long-term benefits arrive. This middle phase is where most valuable growth occurs and where most people exit. Consider two people pursuing the same goal. Both begin motivated. Both encounter resistance. One interprets resistance as a signal to stop. The other interprets it as a normal phase that requires adjustment rather than abandonment. Early on, the person who continues does not feel confident. They often feel slower, less certain, and more exposed. However, they gain familiarity with the terrain. The path becomes less emotionally threatening as effort becomes routine. The person who quits feels immediate relief. Pressure drops. Self-doubt quiets temporarily. However, the underlying pattern remains unchanged. The next pursuit will reach the same uncomfortable phase, and the same decision will appear again. Over time, repeated quitting trains the nervous system to associate discomfort with exit. The threshold for tolerable difficulty decreases. Tasks that once felt manageable begin to feel overwhelming, even when objectively similar. This pattern explains why some people appear stuck despite frequent fresh starts. They are not lacking ambition. They are repeatedly abandoning processes before adaptation can occur. Growth requires exposure long enough for discomfort to lose its signal value. From an observational standpoint, quitting often masquerades as decisiveness. It feels like action because something ends. In reality, it is frequently a return to comfort disguised as clarity. If this analysis feels useful, and if understanding patterns matters more than motivational advice, subscribing simply ensures you see the next one when it appears. No urgency, just continuity. There is a difference between strategic quitting and emotional quitting, and most people confuse the two. Strategic quitting is based on information accumulated over time. Emotional quitting is based on discomfort encountered too early to evaluate accurately. Strategic quitting considers trajectory, feedback quality, and adjustment potential. Emotional quitting reacts to friction, confusion, or lack of immediate validation. One preserves long-term leverage. The other resets the cycle. A simple way to distinguish between them is to ask a specific question before quitting. Have I adjusted my approach, or have I only reacted to discomfort? If no adjustment has been attempted, quitting is almost always premature. From my perspective, this pattern resembles abandoning physical training because the first weeks produced soreness rather than visible strength. The discomfort was part of adaptation, but the exit prevented the benefit from ever arriving. People who quit less often do not push harder by default. They slow down when needed. They adjust methods. They reduce intensity while maintaining direction. They treat friction as information, not a verdict. This is where most advice fails. People are told to be relentless or disciplined, which increases pressure and accelerates burnout. The alternative is not more force. It is persistence without escalation. A useful way to test this pattern is to run a short experiment rather than making a permanent decision. The next time you feel the urge to quit something important, resist the impulse to exit immediately. Continue instead for a brief, defined period, even if the effort feels uncomfortable or inefficient. Write down what you experienced during that extra exposure. Not how you felt initially, but what changed after staying with the task longer than you normally would. Many humans are surprised to find that discomfort peaks early and then declines once adaptation begins. Research consistently shows that exposure builds tolerance, skill, and confidence, even when progress feels slow. The goal is not endurance or intensity. The goal is to gather evidence about whether quitting was actually necessary or simply familiar. This experiment works because it separates exit from emotion. Quitting is no longer an escape. It becomes a considered decision made after information is gathered. People who adopt this approach experience a subtle shift. They quit fewer things, but when they do quit, they do so with clarity rather than regret. Direction stabilizes, confidence increases, not because outcomes improve immediately, but because decisions feel grounded. It is important to clarify that quitting is not always a mistake. Some situations are genuinely misaligned and continuing them produces no meaningful growth. Remaining in a dead-end job with no learning, no trajectory, and no opportunity for adaptation is not persistence. It is stagnation with a paycheck. We see strategic quitting usually follows evidence rather than emotion. The person has attempted adjustment, changed approach, gathered feedback, and confirmed that effort no longer produces learning or leverage. Quitting in this case is not escape, it is reallocation. Emotional quitting, by contrast, happens before adjustment has occurred. The discomfort arrives, friction appears, and exit is chosen before the system has a chance to adapt. The distinction is not how strongly something feels, but whether growth signals are still present. A simple filter helps clarify the difference. If continued effort still produces learning, skill, or increased tolerance, quitting is premature. If continued effort produces only repetition, depletion, or decay without new feedback, quitting may be necessary for forward progress. Humans often confuse these states because both feel uncomfortable. One discomfort signals adaptation. The other signals depletion. The mistake is treating them as identical and responding with the same exit behavior. Some people, after recognizing this pattern, want more than awareness. They want structure that helps distinguish between adjustment and exit without relying on willpower. That framework exists separately as a written system for those who want it. You will find it linked in the description and pinned comment if you want to go deeper. It is not required to understand the pattern, but it helps translate insight into behavior. The reframe is simple. Quitting is not always wrong. Quitting too early is costly. I do not experience discouragement. I observe how often progress appears immediately after people leave the process that would have produced it. When discomfort is treated as a signal to adjust rather than exit, persistence becomes sustainable. Progress does not surge dramatically, it stabilizes. And stability, once established, compounds quietly. End of transmission.